tonight. Thank God for each one of you, and I pray a blessing over your lives. Everybody's got needs right now. Bring your needs to the Lord tonight. Just bring yourself to Jesus. Hallelujah. And don't hold back. Woo! Give him praise first. Hallelujah. And then let him know your petitions. Hallelujah. I'm trying to write a sermon now about thankfulness and bringing our petitions before the Lord. Hallelujah. In Jesus' name. We love you, Lord, first and foremost. Hallelujah. Here comes the intro song. Praise Jesus. Amen.
And they will say that things as they are not okay. When someone is missing, someone is absent. Yeah, they will say things as they are not okay. When someone is missing, someone is absent. There is coming a day when the bridegroom is taken away.
Hey folks, Radio Preacher Man for Self-Reliance. These are hard times, and it could get harder. You've seen the droughts, you've seen the floods nationwide, worldwide even, so 7 billion people got to eat, so don't be left out with nothing to eat. Get yourself some victuals put back on the shelf. Now I got a product I want to tell you about. It's called Shelf Reliance, and this is good food. You can use it on a regular basis. Get you some dehydrated food, and you got some easy prep meats. They got vegetables and fruits dehydrated, ready to eat as a snack, or you can reconstitute them for your cooking needs. You can get grains, bread, milk, eggs. It's a full line of food products, even dessert, such as ice cream and fudge brownies. Hello. So check it out at radiopreacherman.shelfreliance.com. That's radiopreacherman.shelfreliance.com. It's also a wonderful business opportunity for those of you looking to do something with your lives on the side, or instead of being unemployed, or whatever your situation is, brothers and sisters.
Things are not okay right now. Oh, things are not okay right now. Things are not okay right now. Jesus, things are not okay right now. Things are okay right now. Things are not okay right now. Things are not okay, and they won't be till you come back. No, they won't be till you come back. No, they won't be till you come back. No, they won't be till you come back.
Oh, hallelujah, but they will be when we see him a-coming in the clouds and we hear the trumpet sound. What? Then everything's going to be all right. Woo, hallelujah, but for life. But we're blessed to be a child of God. Do you know how many people live without the peace that passes all understanding? The peace that you and I experience in our lives. Even in the midst of trials, we have peace. Hallelujah. So carry on, my brothers and my sisters. Don't let nothing deter you from finishing your race. Hallelujah. It is so late in the game, but we're going to talk a little bit about the game that's going on in this world. It's deep and it's wide, but Peter Kling's got some ideas about this. Now, Peter is considered as the Einstein of biblical prophecy. Peter Kling combined his scientific and religious knowledge together to uncover the mystery that religion has tried to keep hidden for over 2,000 years. And people, you're listening to Revelations Per Minute. I've talked about the spirit of the Pharisee many times. That spirit of the Pharisee is what nailed Jesus to the cross. So we are here tonight with Peter Kling, and we're going to talk about what's jumping off now in 2012. Pert near the end of the year, too. What? Good day, Peter. How are you?
Well, good evening over here. I got to preface this by saying I'm in eastern Pennsylvania, northeastern Pennsylvania, just west of New York City, about 60 air miles, and we are under total blackout.
What?
There is not a lick of electricity because of Hurricane Sandy here, and I'm surprised. I'm on a borrowed cell phone right now. So I'm not sure how long this is the first time the cell phone has worked all day long too, from what I understand. So I'm actually over at a neighbor's house at a little higher elevation, and his service happens to work real well, and he's kind enough to let me use his cell phone. So I'm not sure if it's going to last the whole show.
Okay.
But we'll get part of this in, and we can reschedule again. So I do apologize to everyone. And I hate to start off with an apology, but you know what? This hurricane was not a natural event. And, I've lived in the Northeast for about 45 years.
Right.
And I've never yet seen a tropical storm come up along the coast and then make a left-hand turn and drive right through a cold front. Usually those cold fronts will push those tropical storms further out to sea. But how do you, and this storm made such an elaborate left-hand turn to come in off the ocean to run headlong right into a cold front. Now, if you haven't paid any attention to HAARP, H-A-A-R-P, do some investigation work, and you're going to find out all about it, because HAARP can control our weather patterns, and it certainly did control this one.
I've heard tell about that type of thing. In fact, that was on my list of things to talk to you about tonight, was this very subject you've brought up. So I'm glad you did, because I even have written in my notes, flood, God or man. And that's my way of saying exactly what you just said. Is this flood something that was man-made, or is it the judgment of God upon our nation as we approach Election Day? But I'm with you a little bit.
I was going to say, you got to look back at the Scriptures, and the Scriptures says the whole world is lying in the power of the wicked one, and what he even has control over the airwaves, over the air, and so now everything goes over the air these days. All our TV transmissions, radio transmissions. This show is being put over the air somehow, usually through cable. But I think people get the point. And now we've got this super weapon called HAARP. And there's actually, from what I understand, there's 17 of them owned by different countries around the world, and they want to build more of them, and they really want to make this planet a prison planet. And so we are really living in difficult times, hard to deal with, where people have become lovers of money rather than lovers of God. They've become obstinate, not open to any kind of an agreement. And it seems like the government officials and the politicians and the world's rulers are all trying to get a bigger piece of their pie.
Exactly.
How do we get to this point? How do we get to where we are now?
And we're seeing a greater disparity between the ones that got that piece of the pie and the ones that don't. I'm seeing more homeless people, Peter, than I've seen in my life. I mean, it's getting to be an epidemic. I mean, they're just everywhere, walking down the streets with their bags on their back, thumbs out, or whatever. It's like, when did this happen? And then you're living in an area where you're experiencing drastic power outages. I mean, all of New York's a mess, New York City, and what else? Jersey. I mean, this storm spans like 800 miles, right?
Yeah, this is one of the largest storms ever to hit the Northeast, and it set a record in barometric pressure. This has got the lowest barometric pressure of any storm recorded coming in off of the ocean. And you just can't make a decision and say, oh, well, this was caused by HAARP. I've been watching this for the past week. I've been watching this unfold. A week ago, they were telling us that, this storm is going to track up the East Coast, and then it's going to make a left-hand turn and come on land right around New York City. It's like, how did they know this a week ago? I mean, sometimes they can't even tell you it's going to rain tomorrow.
Yeah. Good point.
Somebody
because,
knows.
and this close to the election sure does make a brother wonder, too, what's really going on. I mean, we're
Absolutely.
talking a week to the election day.
Yeah,
Wow.
and the United States the Northeast is in a mess. Some of the most densely populated areas of the country is in a mess. Massive power outages. And I heard today that we're supposed to get our power back on sometime around Saturday or Sunday. So we're going to be without power for about a week.
Well, I saw it on the MSNBC website, MSN website this morning, and it showed the depth and the width of that storm. How much of the USA it was over was phenomenal. And, I'm just blessed. We haven't even had a raindrop in Florida, and the whole time y'all have been experiencing all this. So it's, I guess, luck of the draw this time, but it could happen here, it could have happened anywhere. It's sad. I feel for you. How many people are without power now? Have you heard?
Oh, no, because we don't have power. I can't get any news.
Oh, okay. I heard it's in the millions.
I got to crank up. No doubt, because there's approximately 40 million people in the New York City area that are going to be affected by this storm. I would have to say probably at least half of them have to be without power. Every report that there's little pockets where the power is still on, but for the majority of places, I was even told the local Walmart closed down because they didn't have any power and they couldn't get their backup generators working. So,
wow.
If they can't open up doors, it's got to be bad.
Yes. Now you mentioned HAARP a moment ago, and isn't there the the largest HAARP outfit is up on the North Pole of all things, or something to that effect? You know what I'm talking about? The really big. They got a big HAARP unit of some kind up there. Are you familiar with that? There's actually two in Alaska, and the one that seems to be the most publicized, I believe, is the one that's closest to Fairbanks, if I recall correctly. It's that you get some conflicting reports on things, but this is a radio station that puts out approximately 1 billion watts of power. Now, think about your local radio. Your FM station, a major city FM station, will put out about 100,000 watts of power for your listening enjoyment. Yeah. Well, this puts out 1,000 times more than that. Well, is it supposed to go all over the world? Is that supposed to go all over the U.S. or what, with the emergency warnings or something? Or what's the purpose of HAARP? The real purpose?
Well, what the real purpose is and what they're using it for may be two dramatically different things. What the actual facility is, it's a transmitter, so it'll transmit frequency, depending on where you want to put that frequency at, and it shoots a beam of radiation up into the ionosphere. It actually heats up the ionosphere and causes an artificial high there. And they can direct weather patterns by causing that artificial high. What happens is the low pressure front wants to funnel right in behind the high, and it'll follow it wherever they want to drag it to. So it's just a matter of changing direction or steering it where they want to go.
Now, do they admit to all this, or is this just what you have found out through your own investigative research, Peter?
A little bit of both. You can actually go online. You can find the HAARP website, which will show you the actual facility. It's owned by the Department of the Navy, and you can see pictures of it there. They explain some of what they intend to do. It's for high altitude auroral studies, and they're trying. They're not telling you what it's capable of. However, the scientists and researchers who know what it's capable of. The power of it was first discovered back in the early 1980s when they were looking for oil. And what they would do is they would have small machinery and they would beam down a radio wave into the earth and look for the returns coming back up.
Yes, sir.
And they found that when they hit the ground with about 2.3 hertz, they were setting off small earthquakes. And so
Wow.
all you have to do is hit the ground and this is why that happens. On fault lines, when you have two pressure plates that are coming together, the frequency that occurs just before those pressure plates split is 2.3 to 2.5 hertz. And so you've got, once it attains that frequency, those fault lines shift, those plates shift. It's kind of like, rubbing your finger around the top of a glass. All of a sudden it starts to squeak and you get a certain frequency because of the vibration.
Yeah.
It's the same type of thing is happening. Those sound waves are hitting the fault lines, and it's causing them to slip because they're running at the same frequency. So there's a lot that it can do, and there's a lot that it's alleged to do. Now, one of the things that it's also said that can be done with HAARP is they can transmit actual sound waves directly to your head. So in other words, you would not hear these sound waves with your ears, but what actually happens is that your jaw picks up the vibration, and your jaw transmits the vibration into your eardrum, and that's how you're actually hearing it. It's by the vibration. Now, here's something interesting. You want to talk about a false antichrist showing up?
Yeah.
You can make a hologram using 3 lasers. If you shoot 3 lasers from each from a different side, you can produce what looks like a real image there. Now, it might fade in and out a little bit, but it'll look like a real image. So now we know that they have these flying chemical lasers, these 747s that fly around, that they said they can target missiles. If the missile's launched, they can target the laser on and shoot it out of the sky.
Yeah.
Well,
right.
If they can do that, then they can produce a hologram and transmit the word of Christ right to that hologram.
Wow.
And so people who see this apparition would actually think it's the return of Christ, and actually it's the Antichrist at work. How would you know? Talk about a deception.
Yes. I'm sure there's going to be some elaborate things that occur at the advent of the Antichrist when he actually shows himself. And I noticed on your website, which is peterkling.com, folks, you've got an article there, or a little video rather, it's a long video, about Prince William as the Antichrist, future king of one world government, that you did with Alfred Weber. And wow, when I saw that, I immediately thought, Willie or Barry? Willie or Barry? Everybody says it's Willie or Barry,
Well,
but
when Jesus came on the scene, who came before Jesus?
John the Baptist, you're right. And I've said that myself many times, Peter, that I think Obama's setting the pace for the Antichrist. He's shown the world that one man can be admired by different countries. You remember how before he even got elected, he was on world tour like a rock star, baby. Paving
Absolutely.
the way. Yeah, even when everybody thought
when he was given the Nobel Peace Prize, everybody was like looking around saying, "What did he do?"
Mm-hmm.
What did this man do? Well, you see, that Nobel Peace Prize wasn't a prize; it was a mission statement. And so, he was already being touted as someone important, someone to look to for direction. And if you notice, whenever, with all the conflicts that we've had here in dealing with the Middle East, particularly with Iran, the president has backed the UN 100%. And you see, it's interesting. Whenever he gets on his UN bandwagon, he puts on a UN blue tie. You got to watch his ties.
Kind of like this one? Oh, my goodness. I got me a blue tie on tonight, but I'm not in support of anything except Jesus tonight, folks. But
well, that's where it all comes down to. And you see, we're living in these last days, and it dawned on me, and this is kind of like where I all got started. I've got a very long history in Bible education. They started teaching me Bible history and Bible prophecy back before I was even 5 years old. I was learning this. And I had an event happen in my life at the age of 9. I actually had a dream that came true. And I ran home to tell my mother about it, and I got sent to bed. here I was, this little 9-year-old kid, and all of a sudden this dream is unfolding. Something that I saw less than 2 weeks earlier in a dream is now happening in real life. And I was like, how did this happen? And I ran home and told my mom about it, and my mom was like, well, that's nice, son. It's time for you to go to bed. And that was the end of it. And I was like, wow, I just had this happen, and I got sent to bed over it. Well, I had this nagging, kids with imaginations, right? The only problem is that it actually happened. It happened just according as I saw it. And now I had no answer. My spiritual end, or the spiritual guide in my life, was kind of cut off, and I needed to have an answer. So I figured, well, maybe science has the answer. So I started studying science. I started studying chemistry at 10 years old. I became a science major. I became a chemist, worked for major corporations, research and development. And one day I was reading my Bible. I was reading Job, the 38th chapter, and I got down around verse 20, 21. And God is asking Job, he says, have you seen my storehouses of ice and snow, which I have saved for the day of distress and war? And I'm thinking, now what did Job know about ice and snow? He lived in the Middle East. What would he know of ice and snow? So I thought, well, what would Job see? And I started meditating on this. We're told to meditate on God's Word. And so I'm looking at the mountains around, kind of like through the eyes of Job, and I can see, there's snow up on top of the mountains. And then I start picturing myself being elevated, like as if I was going into space, and I could start to see the mountaintops all full of ice, and I'm getting further and further out, and I'm seeing more and more of the earth, and I'm saying, oh my goodness, look at the poles. There's the storehouses of ice and snow. And I thought, well, how do you use ice and snow to cause distress and then use it for war? I think, well, you can only make more ice and snow, or you can melt it. And then it dawned on me. If God melts the ice caps, that will change the face of the earth. The ocean levels will get deeper. People will have to move away from the coastlines. There'll be earthquakes because of the redistribution of water weight. And I thought of this back in around 1980. This was 10 years before global and warming became a term. And the wild thing is, Job was written 3,500 years ago.
Yes.
And so now, what do we see? The ice caps are melting at record rates. So it started to dawn on me that the people who would see these things happening are the same people who the whole Bible was written for. If we're living in the days of Revelation, then guess what? The whole Bible, all 3,500 years of history of the Bible was preserved for us down to our day. It's a time capsule of information that we need to know and that we can't live without. Now, here's the thing. Most religion teaches the dogma of the church. I mean, you take any religion, they're going to have their own particular viewpoint on what they perceive to be real. And being a scientist, I came from the aspect of, well, you know what? There are no miracles in science. There are only formulas and explanations that we don't have answers to yet. So there's a way that we can extract what actually happened in the past. Now, here's an interesting point. Science and the Bible seem not to be further apart. You got science saying, we all evolved from chimpanzees or lower life forms, and we've got all this fossil information and so forth. And I always had this kind of internal paradox between my faith and what the Bible said and what I was learning in school and what science had to say. And after I read the scripture in Job, I thought, well, let's use science to see if we can understand and explain the Bible. Let's not look for differences between the two, but let's look for things that are the same. And what does science tell us? Science tells us that our universe is about 14 billion years old, and it was created in the Big Bang. And Genesis starts off, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Bang! There's your Big Bang. And then it says God's active force moved to and fro over the watery deep. And so then we have the start of the Precambrian period, about 1 billion years, which science tells us about 1 billion years, where only simple cell life forms existed. Cyanobacteria, phytoplankton, zooplankton. By the time we get to the end of this 1 billion years, there's not really much more sophisticated life forms than jellyfish. That's about it. And then, all of a sudden, you have the Precambrian period. And now, you go back to Genesis. In Genesis, the first chapter, God says, "Let the seas put forth swarms of fish or life or souls, and let the earth put forth swarms, and let the earth put forth grasses and trees and vegetation of every kind according to its kind." And what we see is the Precambrian period, and there was more genetic information on this planet during the Cambrian period than has ever been on this planet before. There has been more variety of life created during that time than we have ever seen since. I don't know if you know what a trilobite is. That some people call it. The closest living relative that we have today is called a pillbug or a sow beetle or something like that. You know, the little brown bugs, you find them under a piece of wood or something, if you flip it over and they curl up into like a little ball, like a little pill.
Yeah.
Well, once upon a time, there were over 17,000 different kinds of those critters.
Wow.
And that's just one
big.
bug.
Yes.
So, you know, think about it this way. You're an American Indian living about 500-600 years ago, and you go to sleep one day in what is now Central Park, and you and your family wake up the next morning to Manhattan being built around you. All the skyscrapers, all the buses, the cars, all the street vendors, the stores, everything just appears overnight.
Yeah.
Think about that. How could something like that happen? Well, it would take a miracle of God for that to happen. But that same thing happened in the beginning of the Cambrian period. Scientists can't explain it. They said, oh, well, life spontaneously came about. Well, it says in the Bible, God said, let this happen. There we go. Mm-hmm. There's another correlation. Now, here's something interesting. Mm-hmm. We would never be able to understand the full meaning of the Bible until the mid-1950s. That could be the soonest that we could understand it, but really not until about the last 30 years could we understand the full meaning of the Bible.
Yes, sir.
Here's a case in point. Genesis, the second chapter, you read right around verse 21 through 22, 23, right in through there. God says, it's not good for the man to be alone. I'm going to make a helper for him. So he causes a sleep to fall over the man, and he does what? He removes a rib. Yep. He takes a tissue sample, he closes over the wound, and from this tissue sample, he builds a woman, or he genetically engineers a woman from the tissue sample. We wouldn't call it create today, we would call it genetic engineering. Because we can take a cell from one person and fertilize that cell, we can clone that cell, and we can make the clone of the first person, but we don't know how to do the genetic engineering yet. You see, now that we know the full human genome, now we're learning to manipulate it and do genetic engineering. And now we're playing with we're using the hand of God in our work. And right. So we have become like gods ourselves, and that's a dangerous place to be because we're treading where no mortal was meant to go. But back to the Genesis account, Adam even knew it. Adam said, this is at last, flesh of my flesh, bone of my bone. This woman was my clone, or essentially, but she was genetically engineered, not a true clone. She was genetically engineered. And think about how beautiful this is. Adam had a wife that was just like him.
Wow.
She shared his interests. She shared his likes. She shared his dislikes. She was just like him, and he loved her. See?
Yeah.
And so...
I suspect that'd be a nice thing if we could see eye to eye with our spouses all the time, Peter. Hey.
I'll tell you what. Now, unfortunately, they saw eye to eye when it came up with that fruit. Now,
that's true.
Yeah, now here's an interesting about this fruit here. The tree of knowledge of good and evil, or as some people call it today, the tree of duality. They say, well, we have to have a life of duality where we have good and evil. Really, the worst thing that can ever the worst thing that can ever happen is to give a human who has the gift of free will the knowledge of good and evil, because now they have the free will of carrying out evil. And do you really have to have evil or bad things happen to you to be happy or to enjoy your happy times? No. We all dread when something bad happens. We try to avoid evil situations. We try to keep our life as peaceful, loving, and positive as we can, but somehow, somewhere, this evil keeps on crawling in. So I don't see the good part of it. But here's the thing. Let's go back to the tree. God said, from the very day that you're eating from it, you're going to die.
Yeah.
What if that tree had a virus in it which erased part of the genetic code, and so now Adam and Eve eat from this tree, they ingest this virus, their DNA code is damaged, they can no longer reproduce and give a perfect genetic code to their children because they can't pass on what's damaged.
So it was a DNA alteration in the fruit, kind of like reminds me of Snow White when that lady comes with that really bad apple. Good analogy right there, and that apple put her into sleep for a long time until the prince came along. You know the story. But
Absolutely.
Yeah. Tainted apples, man. Right. One day before Halloween, man. I hope that don't happen to anybody.
Seriously.
Yeah, don't eat no strange apples, folks. Just go to the store and get your own, okay? You don't know what's in them apples. But
some hospitals you can take your candy to, or you take your fruit to, and they will X-ray it for you to make sure it is safe to eat, make sure nobody put anything in there or anything. But there's just so much going on in the world. We can't take anything for granted. We really can't.
Yeah.
And this was all foretold. It was going to happen. But now, so we see, when we go back and look at the Bible and look at what science supports what the Bible has to say, and the Bible supports what science has to say. They kind of work hand in hand. Albert Einstein said that science without religion is lame, but religion without science is blind.
Yes, I've heard that.
You put them both together, and you start to get real answers. So let's take a look at this a little deeper. In Genesis 1, it says that, in some places it says that God did something, but in other places it says that God said, let this take place. So God is giving an order. So Yahweh here is telling others to do something. So who's he talking to? Well, we know that there are other life forms in the Bible. There's angels, there's cherubs, there's seraphs, and there's an archangel there too. So there's 4 other different life forms besides human. Okay,
all right.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So now, here's something interesting. At the beginning of the 20th century, almost no one believed in aliens, and everyone went to church. Well, just about everyone went to church on Sunday.
Right.
At the beginning of the 21st century, more people believe in aliens than believe in God, and less people go to church now than they've ever done before.
Yes, that's a true fact. Churches are in decline, even as late as 1980. So we're talking, almost 3 decades ago, or maybe a little over, that there were 80 to 85% of the churches had plateaued or were in decline in their attendance, even 30 years ago, Peter. So where are we at now? It's bad. Churches are closing doors right and left. We got more missionaries coming into this country than going out. We used to be the place that sent them out. We used to be the country that sent out missionaries. Now other countries are sending them to America to save them heathens. There is one good thing out of all of this, and you have to look at it from a practical standpoint. The churches aren't delivering the message that's in the Bible. The church saying, well, look, if you're good, you're going to go to heaven. If you're bad, you're going to go to hell, and we're all going to be raptured out of here anyway. But, those are more man-made than they are according to what's going on in the Bible. See, the churches have forgotten the greatest commandment,
And that greatest commandment, when Jesus was asked, what's the greatest commandment, what did he say? He said, you must love Yahweh your God with your whole heart, your whole soul, and your whole mind. And the second like it was to love your neighbors as you do yourself. Well, now we've got militia groups that are ready to turn around and kill their brothers if they don't believe just like them. We got groups of evangelical people that have given up the faith and love, and would rather turn around and see those some people who don't believe the same way destroyed in war. You know, and so we're creating greater divisions. But what also is happening is that people are becoming aware of the love factor. People are becoming aware that we need to love our brothers and we need to love each other if we're going to make it through this. And people are becoming aware of the truth by means of radio shows like this show here tonight. And what does it say in Acts, the 2nd chapter, the 17th verse? It says, in the last days I shall raise up prophets among you people, not just God's servants, but among all the people. And it goes on to say, and among my slaves I shall raise prophets. So people are now talking about these things that nobody ever talked about before. We never used to talk about aliens. We never used to talk about secret weapons. We never used to talk about the fact that Armageddon's coming, or that this world is doomed. We didn't talk about the Mayan prophecies. We didn't talk about all the different prophecies. And the wild thing is that these prophecies are all coming about at the same time. They're all coming about now.
It makes you wonder what day we're living in, huh?
Yeah, what did they know?
Wow.
So,
when we see everything happening.
Yeah, now if you go back to the biblical record, what do we see? We see that there was, if we want to call it, alien involvement with the human race right from the beginning. So if they're not from Earth, we'll say they're aliens, okay? Whether they're angels, cherubs, seraphs, or demons, or what have you, they're all alien to Earth. They're not from here.
Right.
But some of them are loyal. Some of them have worked for the Lord since day one. And others, like Satan, is now working against the Lord. But here's an interesting thing. In Ezekiel, it refers to, you get the idea that it's referring to Satan as the covering cherub of Eden. It's talking about the accounts talk about the king of Tyre. Oh shucks! It just the two little cities, just the king of Tyre and the king of Sidon, which is still there today in the nation of Israel. Those cities are still on the Mediterranean today, and it talks about the king of those two cities as being a very beautiful, very rich, very powerful, handsome, glorious king. And then he becomes conceited with himself, and he turns his back on what is right, and it makes reference to him as being the covering cherub of Eden, that he was once the covering cherub of Eden. So this angel that we've come to know as Lucifer had to be very powerful if he was involved in creating life on Earth. If life on Earth was genetically engineered, I mean, it didn't just like poof out of nowhere, but think about this. God, the Lord turns around and he says, okay, you angels, go do this. You're going to make flowers, you're going to make insects, you're going to make different types of mammals, you're going to make different types of trees. And if they know how to genetically manipulate things, they can make whatever they want. And it's because it says that Eve seems to have been genetically engineered here. I mean, if you look at the process that's recorded, it's genetic engineering that's going on there. So these life forms, whoever was involved in terraforming this Earth, had to know genetic engineering.
It's probably all right if God does it. Hey, if God does the genetic engineering, you're going to get a good product, because women, they ain't all bad. I'll tell you what.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, we know. We know by the account in Genesis before the days of Noah, during the days of Noah, Earth women were so hot that the sons of the true God came to Earth and took wives for themselves. All who they chose.
So that
they
shows
fathered
what a good job. So God did a good job.
The book of Yep. So you go to the Book of Enoch, and it even gets into greater detail. The Book of Enoch names names and tells how these fallen angels, it calls them the Watchers in the Book of Enoch. It talks about how they got involved in the lives of men and then or lives of women and men, the people back at that time, and then the damage that the Nephilim had done, and then when Enoch was taken. The Bible only says that Enoch was taken, but in the Book of Enoch, it's an interesting account. Enoch was taken by life forms, by the angels who took him. He said that these life forms could change from the form of fire and take the form of man and go back to the form of fire at will. So they can change from pure, what we could call pure energy, to the form of man and then go back to the form of pure energy.
So that's kind of like
to do that.
Yeah, that's more of an angelic being type trick. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, no, but
or demonic.
Now here's or demonic one way or the other. Now, what's the difference between an angel and a demon? Well, there might be some technicals here, but it's more their attitude. Angel means messenger of God. So if we meet one of these life forms and they're telling us something, let's say Gabriel was a messenger of God. He was an angel that brought a message to Daniel. But let's look at the account in Daniel 10. Daniel's waiting for his answer, and he's not getting it. Finally, Gabriel shows up, and he says, I'm sorry, Daniel. I'm sorry that I'm late. I had a wrestling with the Prince of Persia. Well, the Persian Empire at the time was the world empire. It was the fourth world empire. It had just defeated Babylon. And now Gabriel has a wrestling, and this angel, the Prince of Persia, is so strong that Gabriel's got to go back and get Michael, the archangel, to come and fight the Prince of Persia while Gabriel goes and delivers the message. Whoa, what are we talking about here now? What kind of life forms are we talking about?
Evidently, he's pretty powerful. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so now the question is, if there was when Gabriel leaves, he tells Daniel, says, "Well, I got to go back and fight the Prince of Persia." And he says, "Then look, the Prince of Greece is coming." Now wait a minute, the Prince of Greece? Well, we know Greece became the next world power. Greece defeated Persia. Well, who defeated Greece was Rome, and who took Rome's place? But the United States and Great Britain, or Great Britain and the United States, really. So now, do each one of these world powers have princes ruling over them who are in league with Satan and working against Yahweh and the likes of Michael the Archangel or Jesus? Oh. So now we have a rebel force that went contrary to Yahweh's plans. And it's interesting. We're going to give a little definition about God. This took me 2 years to figure out.
Okay.
And this upset some people, and other people just go, wow, that's amazing. We know that you cannot create nor destroy energy. According to physics, the law of physics, you cannot create it nor destroy it. You can only change its form. And in Revelation, we are told by God himself, he says, I am the Alpha and I am the Omega. Before me nothing existed and nothing will exist after me. So now, wait a minute. If you can't destroy energy, you can only change its form. What was there before our three-dimensional universe? Well, you see, actually, our three-dimensional universe isn't really 3 dimensions. It's at least 10 dimensions. Because you get into string theory or M theory, and according to string and M theory, in order for our 3-dimensional world to be here, there needs to be at least 7 other dimensions plus the variable dimension of time. So that means there needs to be 10 dimensions. Well, wait a minute. Let's look at this. There needs to be 7 other dimensions besides the 3 that we live in? Yeah, like the spiritual number of God is 7.
Right.
Ooh.
Right.
And so for spiritual completeness, you need the number 7. Spiritual incompleteness, we are told, is the number 6, as in 666 in the sign of the Antichrist, right?
Yes.
And
I forgot.
The the earthly complete number for man is 10. We have 10 fingers, 10 toes, and we count in base 10. And according to the Bible, there were 10 virgins in the bride class. 5 of them remained wise virgins, and 5 of them were foolish virgins. But it's always the number 10, which is for earthly completeness. So if you took our 3 dimensions that we live in, add the spiritual 7 dimensions, guess what? We get an earthly completeness of 10 dimensions. Okay, let's go back to creating and destroying energy. Now, if nothing existed before these 10 dimensions, and we know that there's 10 because in order for us to be here in the 3, there's got to be that other 7. If none of this existed, and we know we can't create or destroy energy, we can only change its form, then at one time, the only thing that could have existed is energy in its most pure form or state, which means at one time, there was only pure energy, just like it says in Revelation. Nothing will exist after me, and nothing existed before me. It was just pure energy. But we know that this energy was intelligent. It had to be intelligent because we're intelligent, right? Would make sense?
And we're made in His image,
So now what caused this energy to become God or Yahweh? Interesting. One of the best meanings I ever read, or definitions that I ever read for the word Yahweh, was He who causes to become. I thought about this. If there was only this pure energy, what was it that triggered this pure energy to become a 10-dimensional multiverse that we live in? We can find that answer in 1 John, the 4th chapter. This energy, being intelligent and having a consciousness to it, came up with a concept. It got a clue. It got a concept, and that concept is love. God is love. Now think about this. Love. It works on so many different levels. We love to love others. We love to be loved. We can love our house. We can love our car. We can love our dog. We can love our kids. We can love our parents. We can love our grandparents, our aunts, our uncles, our relatives. We can love that significant other in a romantic way which no one else can. And we never get tired of loving. And those who become aware love God. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting?
Those that become aware love God. I like that.
Yeah. You have no choice. If you're going to love yourself, and you're going to love your wife, and you're going to love your kids, and you're going to love your dog, and your grandparents, your extended family, if it all comes from the same energy, and it was love that transformed the energy, well, guess what? This is going to blow some people's minds. You know, in Genesis, God said, let us make man in our image. Now, the 10-dimensional multiverse that we live in already became about. And what is the image of God? Is it the physical world that we live in? Is it the heavens, the stars? Well, it has to be everything. And string theory says that these other 7 dimensions are smaller, so they exist within the 3 dimensions that make up our world. So, in essence, we are in God, and God is within us, literally.
Amen.
This may be a hard thing to understand. But now, here's something to think about. In Genesis, it says, let us create man in our image. Well, does God look like a human? No. The image of God is pure energy. Now, what about humans is pure energy? It's our soul. And so there it says in Genesis, the 9th chapter, the 5th verse, from every living creature I shall ask, and yes, from man himself, when he dies, I shall ask back his soul. And it's our soul that is created in the image of God, our life force, our inner workings. Our physical body is a result of living on planet Earth. I'll give you an example. If we lived on, let's say, Mars, which has less gravity than Earth, we would be much taller because we wouldn't have the 14 point whatever it is pounds pushing per square inch pushing down on us, so we would grow taller. If we lived on Jupiter, which has massive gravity compared to the Earth, we'd be little guys. We'd be running around. We wouldn't be any bigger than the size of rats.
Wow.
But that would be, and we would still look like humans. But that's because of the gravitational forces that are at work there. So our body, our physical body, is dictated by the fact that we live on this planet. Guess what? If this was a water planet, if there was no land, we couldn't exist as we do now. We would have to look more like a fish or a mermaid or a merman, because we couldn't exist in this form. There's no way that we could. And just think, if you had to tread water all day long, everybody would die by the end of the day. But
oh dear, that's cute.
So it's not our physical form. It's our spiritual form that is made in the image of God. Hence, we are part of God, and God is part of us, and so is everything else. That means that everything in existence was made in love. Think about it. If you built your own house as a shelter for your family, this is a loving act to provide shelter and a home for your family. The earth is our home on a bigger scale, and we don't really need houses. We don't really need, we can kind of, if we became nomadic again and we could move to the different parts of the earth, just like the Indians did for centuries, move back and forth wherever they needed to go on by the seasons. They were nomadic. They went and they hunted and they fished and they gathered in different places, and they lived here for thousands of years doing that. Or we can become farmers and settle down, whichever you want to do. The earth will provide. But think if the earth was perfect. And you see, what God wanted done in Genesis.
Right.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was going to say he created everything for his pleasure as well. We comment on how you said everything was made in love, and God is love, and he created everything for his pleasure, and coincidentally for our pleasure, as we're his created beings. So I was just tossing that in as a side note to what you were saying earlier. But go ahead with what you were saying next. I'm sorry.
Well, you bring up a good point. You see, if you go along with the creation story, which I prefer to believe, and I'd rather believe that there was an intelligence, whether our physical form was genetically engineered or whether, exactly how it all happened, we don't know. And that's one of the problems with the Bible. It's a need-to-know book. It doesn't tell us all the extra history that happened before us. It just tells us what we need to know.
Right.
And by by learning what's in there, we can find all the answers that we need. But you raise a good point. You see, God, and you got to love this. If you're a grandparent, you're going to love this. You've got your house, which you raised your kids in. If you have a traditional American family or a traditional family, it doesn't have to be just from America, but any part of the world. They have their home where they raise their kids, and now the grandkids come back. Maybe you put a swing set up for the grandkids, or you put in a swimming pool for the grandkids. Why? Because you love to see them play. You love to see them have a good time. And you buy them presents, you wrap them up, you give them to them. Why? Because you wanted to spend your money? No. Because you want to see the reaction on the child's face when the child tears apart that box and gets into the present and says, "Oh, Grandma, Grandpa, Mama, Dad, this is just what I wanted." And you love to see the joy and the happiness on their face. Why? Because it gives us joy and happiness, because there's more joy in giving than there is in receiving.
Mm-hmm.
But,
yes.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world. We see man's inhumanity to man. We see the earth, Mother Earth herself, actually being raped by the corporate empires of this world. We've seen disasters like what's gone on in Japan with Fukushima. That thing's been a radioactive portal for a year and a half. That thing's done nothing but belt out radioactive material into the atmosphere, and it's literally killing people right here in the United States. It's killing people all around the world, and the governments are hiding that from us.
Right.
They're not telling us this.
I'm sure.
They're spraying stuff in the atmosphere. People talking about chemtrails more and more. Well, just the particles that come out normal jet exhaust aren't good for you. Go stand behind a jet and breathe in the exhaust fumes. See how long it takes for you to turn around and get sick.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, not this week because of the hurricane, but typically on any given day, there are about 5,000 jets which fly over the United States, commercial airliners.
Mm-hmm.
So think of all that pollution, all that stuff being put up there. So the earth is being ruined. And again, in Revelation, it says that God will bring to ruin those ruining the earth. Never before, until this generation, never before did we have the capability of destroying the earth by atomic warfare. Now, there's been some reduction in atomic weapons, but at one time, at its height, there was about 20,000 pounds of TNT explosive for every man, woman, and child on this earth. Think about that. Think about the government coming up with a tractor trailer and unloading half of its contents, 20,000 pounds of TNT, and say, okay, get up on top, we're going to blow you up. Well, not only going to blow the person up, you're going to blow up a whole neighborhood.
Yeah.
20,000 pounds explosive power for every man, woman, and child. Is this God's love, or is the world in the power of the wicked one?
Oh, it definitely is, I'd say right about now, Peter. Sure, you're right. But getting back to what you just said, too, about the need-to-know book, how the Bible is a need-to-know book, I like that. But I think that kind of builds our faith, you know, when we don't have every detail.
If I gave you a clue here, and you know, kind of like a scavenger hunt, well, I'll tell you, this is, I spent a 35-year scavenger hunt going through the Bible to dig all this stuff up and then try to make, you know, not just the spiritual end of the Bible, because you can't beat the message that's delivered there. And we need to pay attention especially to what Jesus said, because, you know, we've got the whole book, the Old Testament and the New Testament, but we've got, we need to pay particular attention to the words of Jesus, especially when he told us about the greatest commandment, to love each other. He even gave us the parable of the Good Samaritan, where now the Samaritans and the Jews hated each other. And yet it was a Samaritan who turned around and helped this Jewish man, binding his wounds and taking him to an inn and even paying for any kind of additional medical expenses that would be incurred. That's how we have to be toward each other. It's not lock and load time. It's give each other a hug time.
Amen.
Because if we're... You know, I just can't get behind people who say, get out your weapons, get ready and lock and load because we're ready to go to war. Wait a minute, who are we going to go to war with? Ain't nobody invading us. You know what? We're supposed to love our enemy.
Well,
what? That's what it says. And if you love your enemy, guess what? They can no longer be your enemy.
Yeah, that's true. Not for long, you know. But how do you love, like, say, Israel's situation where they're surrounded on every side by people that have sworn to kill them?
You know, I saw something that was that really touched my heart, and this really came to me. The president of Iran last month came to the United States to speak at the United Nations. Now, a lot of people saw that. It was covered in the news, and he got all sorts of different comments about that. But what people didn't see is that in a small meeting afterward, a group of Orthodox Jews from Brooklyn, New York, met with the president of Iran, and they gave him an award. And you can find this on YouTube or on Google search. Go. Don't take my word for it. Go look up everything that I say, so this way you learn it for yourself. If you just say Peter Kling said, well, that and a subway token will get you on a train. But if you do it, if you look up the information yourself, then it'll be embedded into your mind. Now, here's the thing. They had a whole room full of when I say whole room full, it was probably somewhere between a dozen and 20 Orthodox Jews who gave the president of Iran an award for being a tolerant person and for supporting Judaism in Iran. And when they left, all of them hugged and kissed the president of Iran. You know, the traditional Middle Eastern kiss. They at least shook his hand, or they at least they nodded and bowed before him before they left. Now,
wow,
I have a friend of mine.
Didn't know that.
I have a friend of mine. Yeah, a friend of mine. His name is Vahid Kamal. Vahid, his mother is Jewish, and his father is Iranian. And this is about 10, 12 years ago. This is just around 9/11. Yep, Jewish and Iranian. I said, he goes by his Israeli name, Josh. I said, Josh, what's really going on in the Middle East? He said, Peter, it's all politics.
Mm-hmm.
He said, it's all politics. He said, the Jewish and the Islamic people have lived together in peace for hundreds and thousands of years. He says, we've never had this type of a situation. We've always gotten along. He says, this is all politics. Ah, politics. Who controls the politics of the world? See, now this sets us on a whole nother course, and this brings us back to the need to know of the Bible. Let's go back into what Jesus had told us. He talked about the end of the Jewish system of the first century, and the things that he talked about also apply to our time today. Now, interestingly enough, in Matthew, the 24th chapter, most of this is recorded, Jesus' disciples, get him on the Mount of Olives, and they say, Lord, tell us when you're coming back. And, what are going to be the signs? And he said, well, there will be earthquakes in one place after another. There'll be food shortages in one place after another. There would be wars and rumors of wars. And he said, all these things you're going to hear about, but don't be frightened yet. There's more to come. And then he goes on and he talks about all the different things that we're going to see. Now, what we see here, interestingly enough, the point of earthquakes, while Hurricane Sandy has been being manipulated on the East Coast, what most people have kind of missed is that there was a 7.7 magnitude earthquake last Friday evening or early Saturday out on the west coast of Canada, and it wasn't just a 7.7. Now, that's a fairly decent-sized earthquake. Now, before I lost my internet, I went and checked, and people who still have power, who are listening to this show, you can go and you can check. You go to the USGS, United States Geographical Survey, and you can go see the earthquakes for the last 7 days and go out and take a look at this, where the 7.7 earthquake was off the coast of Canada, north of Vancouver Island. And you'll find that there are actually 70. When I last looked, there were 70 earthquakes in that area that happened in the past several days.
Wow.
70. Not just one of 7.7. Hey, isn't that interesting?
That's a God number. Yeah. Spiritual completion is 7, you told us. So 7 times 10 is 70. Wow. Yeah, and how many times are we supposed to forgive those who injure us? 7 times? No, 70 times. So, here we've had 70 earthquakes in this one little area in about 48 hours. Wow. Now, that's not good. Yeah. I mean... think about that. It wasn't just one. It was 70. So the earth... Now, if that's not an earthquake in one place after another, right after the other... Now, the same thing happened out in California last month, down toward the Salton Sea. They had over, and California went nuts. In California, they had over 600 earthquakes in a week. Yeah, I heard that. At one time. Sure. Wow. Yeah. Okay, so we got what Jesus said about earthquakes in one place after, and those are just the ones that they hear about. There are approximately 7,000 earthquakes a month going off around the world that people just don't have any clue about. Wow. Most of them are small. They're not major. We get about 3, 6, and over every week, and usually one close to 7 goes off every month or two. We get a 7+ quake. Yeah, that's not too uncommon anymore to hear about a 7. Not at all. My God, help us. No. So now, according to your estimation, the earthquakes are becoming more common then, and also stronger, right? That's a pretty general consensus. So, from 1998 until now, over the past 15 years, earthquakes have risen over 700%. Wow, that's a bunch. Yeah. Yeah. Another 7 number, too. How about that? Yes, sir. So,
Go ahead.
yeah, what do you make of this? I mean, that's definitely signs of the times. What other things are we seeing currently that would, indicate the return of the Lord is near?
Well, let's take a look at another Revelation 8, Revelation chapter 8. I have all accounts for. Revelation chapter 8 starts off when the trumpet blasts are starting to be given. The first trumpet blast is against the earth. In the prophecies, you have to look at what the result is, not the thing that causes the result, but what the result is. Now, the result of the first trumpet blast is that a third of the earth is dried up and burnt and kept as fire. There are global fires that every year they're around the whole earth.
Yeah.
NASA actually has a satellite that keeps track of all our forest fires. You can go online, you can track it down, and you can see the accumulated forest fires over the past year, and it looks like a third of the earth being burned up.
Is that right?
Absolutely. Wow. Now, interestingly enough, the scripture also says that the ground would be dried up, and didn't we see the Great Plains of America be dried up this summer?
Yes,
where
sir.
The crops were failed, they were burned up in the field.
Yes, we sure did.
And that's going to cause food shortage come next year.
Yep, you're right.
So first trumpet blast taken care of. Second trumpet blast. After that, John sees something like a great burning mountain being thrown into the sea. And he said, and the sea becomes like the blood of a dead man, and a third of the souls in the sea die, and a third of the boats are wrecked. And the news would tell us that BP and Halliburton were blamed for it, and we saw the Gulf oil disaster where it looked like something like a burning mountain was thrown into the sea.
Yes.
So we got to see that. The next one, some people will differ on, but I look at the result. The next one is a star that falls from heaven, and this star pollutes a third of the rivers and a third of the fountains. So this star pollutes the drinking water, and the men drink from this water, and they get sick, and they die. Wow. And the star's name is Wormwood.
Men died.
Now, here's the thing. Wormwood in Russian is pronounced Chernobyl.
Yes, you're right.
And we had Chernobyl 25 years ago. That was the first nuclear meltdown disaster that became really public, where it created a large amount of damage that we're still suffering with today. People in Ukraine are still suffering with radioactive problems today, where all the fallout went from northern Ukraine all the way up through Scotland. 2 million people died as a direct result of it, and it ruined somewhere in the neighborhood of like 200 million hectares of farmland, totally destroyed because of nuclear fallout.
Yes, sir.
And that lasted less than a month. Fukushima, as I brought up earlier, has lasted over a year and a half now, and they have no intention of shutting it off. What are they doing? Why are they releasing all of this radiation that is going to destroy us? Our children are going to die. Our grandchildren are going to die if something doesn't happen quickly to bring this to an end. And yet we're only facing more of it. So the third trumpet blast is taken care of. The fourth trumpet blast, it says that a third of the sun was darkened, a third of the moon was darkened, and a third of the stars likewise did not give. I'm sorry?
Sorry, my wife was commenting. Honey, you interrupted our thought. But she said, you're a bummer because you're telling us all this stuff, I guess, but it's all right. The truth hurts sometimes.
Well, yeah, and it should hurt. It should hurt us all enough to wake us up. It's kind of like, if you sleep. I'll tell Well, maybe I won't tell that joke, but anyway, it's like if you don't know it, it's like the joke where the guy's falling asleep in church and his wife sticks him with the pin and wakes him up. You know.
Yeah.
It's not a dirty joke, but you know, it's this. I'll tell it real quick since I brought it up.
Okay.
This preacher's noticing that one of his parishioners is starting to fall asleep during a sermon, and so he just turns around and he asks a question of Brother Jones. He says, "Brother Jones, who made the Garden of Eden?" And Brother Jones nodded off there. And his wife takes her hat pin and she sticks him right in the thigh, and he jumps up and he says, "Oh my God!" And the preacher's looking at him, thought he was surely asleep, and so you know the preacher's watching him a little bit longer, and he sees Brother Jones start to nod off there again, and he says, "Brother Jones, who's God's son?" And his Brother Jones' wife turns around and sticks her pin right in the side of right in Brother Jones' side. And he jumps up again and he says, "Jesus Christ!" And so the preacher's like, "Oh, I can't catch this boy. He's falling asleep. I know he's falling asleep, but he's got the right answer." and he goes on a little bit more. Sure enough, you know, it's warm Sunday afternoon church, and Brother Jones he's starting to snore now. And so the preacher says, "Brother Jones, what did Adam say? What was Eve's first words to Adam?" And Brother Jones' wife turns around, sticks him with that needle again, and Brother Jones jumps up and he says, "Will you stop sticking me with that thing?"
Oh, goodness.
So we need to be stuck. You know, it's like we're not going to be falling asleep. We need to be stuck, and we need to be woken up to what's going on. And that's part of the problem that, you know, it's like we work so hard, we're trying to make a living. You know, some families, mom and dad, if they're lucky enough to have a job, they're out there, they're working. The poor kids are shipped off to grandma or wherever. They come home, they're tired. We turn on the TV. We don't want to know anything. We don't want to hear anything. We just want to zone out, and then we're ready to do the whole thing the very next day. And we live that way day after day after day after day after day after day. Wait a minute. What happened to coming home, shutting off the TV, and sitting back and talking to each other? What about spending time together as a family and doing family things? I don't blame anybody because they want to watch TV, but you can't. You have to do the other things that keep your family close and together, and we have to become aware. And TV will put you to sleep faster than anything else.
Yeah. It'll also wake you up if you leave it on in the middle of the night, too, when the commercials come on.
Yeah.
The commercials are always louder than what was on, you know. Oh, dear.
So we live in this rat race of a system where people just are, you know, we doing everything we can to survive and to make ourselves a better life and try to make the earth a better place for our kids.
Right.
And it's just not happening. The harder we work, the more we lose. The more we lose, really, the more we fall down and the more we stumble and the more angry we get and the more hate we tend to build up. And then hate builds fear because we're afraid of other things that may happen in our life when we fall out of love.
Yeah.
I'm not saying, you know, if you love God, your whole life is going to work out. You might still have disasters. I did. I got to the point. You know, I've been tested many times. I wouldn't wish my life on anyone. And when I was told to write a book, I was told to write the book Letters to, which became Letters to Earth You Can Survive Armageddon. But I didn't do that right away. I got involved in other things. I got involved in business, and along came 2008, and I lost everything. Not only did I lose everything materially, I almost lost. I did lose my health. I almost starved to death. Something happened with it. Something broke inside, and I couldn't eat anymore.
Wow.
And I was close to 200 pounds. I shrunk down to 114 pounds. I got out of the shower one day and I looked into the mirror and I saw a dead friend staring back at me, and I said, I got to get myself better because I can't live like this. And after it was all over, I was left with literally nothing. It took them 4 months to figure out why I was losing so much weight. When I finally did get back to my doctor, I had to change doctors and go to a whole group of doctors for them to figure it out, and they started testing me every way that they could. And they finally, after 4 or 5 months of testing, came up with the fact that I needed an operation. Okay, well, that has helped, but it hasn't solved the problem altogether. But life goes on. But I lost everything. I lost everything in this situation. And the only thing that I didn't lose is the idea to write a book. And I thought, wow, maybe I really should have written this book back when I was first told to write it, and maybe none of this other stuff would have happened, because I would have gotten involved in doing the Lord's work as opposed to getting involved in doing my own work. And so for the next year, I recovered both physically, and I wrote the book. I wrote Letters to Earth You Can Survive Armageddon. And, I haven't made any... No, as a matter of fact, I would have made more money as a greeter in Walmart, because people like to have their ears tickled and they don't want to know the truth. And they'll learn the truth if they read Letters to Earth You Can Survive Armageddon, because we can survive Armageddon. But we need to be woken up to the things that are going on in this world. If you are asleep at the switch, expect disaster. But if you are expecting disaster to happen, there's no way you're going to be asleep at the switch. And aren't we told, when we see these, first of all, we're told to stay awake. He said, I'm coming as a thief in the night. As a thief in the night. You're not going to know, so you need to stay awake. And when you see these things happening, we're told to stand up, lift our heads erect, or lift our heads up and stand up and get ready to leave. Now, get ready for what? Get ready for the second coming of Christ. Get ready for this coming. Get ready for the change in paradigm. And you see, now we know why Exodus was written. Look at the back of your money. Look at the back of your dollar bill. What do you see on the back of your dollar bill? You see, everybody see a pyramid there?
Yeah.
So who's ruling over us? Must be the Egyptians if we got their pyramid on our money. Think about that. And what's that above the pyramid? Oh, isn't that the Egyptian god's eye, Ra, the all-seeing eye above that? So aren't we essentially under the control of the Egyptians? Are we not God's people under the control of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York and the people who own them, who are actually the major situation? And here comes the first force in the Antichrist. See, Antichrist, by definition, is anything against Christ. Anti-Christ. I'm against Christ. Who would be more against Christ than the Zionists in the Middle East? You see, the Zionists are looking for world control. And that's where the political problem is coming in the Middle East. It's between the Zionists that are ruling the world and the countries, and they're doing it through the banking system.
Right.
They're doing it through the banking system. And so if you control the money, guess what? You control what goes on. We used to live in the world where the golden rule was treat your brothers as you wanted to be treated yourself. Now the golden rule is he who has the gold makes the rule. And who has the gold?
The elite.
We go back to 1933. Everybody loved Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Franklin Delano Roosevelt gave the people of the United States a really good screw. And what he did is he signed a piece of paper just like Obama does now. Only his piece of paper says it's illegal for you to use gold as illegal tender anymore. You are only allowed to own $100 in gold coin. All the rest of the gold has to be turned into has to be sold to the Treasury Department. And it was the Federal Bank of New York who was buying up the gold at $20.76 an ounce. I'm sorry, $20.67 an ounce. And they bought up over 500 tons of gold. They emptied the Americans' pockets out. Yes. 500 tons. They paid about $380 billion in gold, in cash, is what that gold cost them. Now, a year later, FDR comes along and he signs another one of these presidential proclamations, an executive order here, and he raises the strike price of gold from $20.67 an ounce up to $35 an ounce, and the Federal Reserve made 40% on their money or on their investment. They went from $380 billion up to $520 billion in a year. Isn't that sweet?
Yeah. Now we just go further in debt every year, huh?
Yep.
Wow.
Yep. And when the Federal Reserve Bank of New York came into existence, we owed them nothing. Now we owe them over $16 trillion, and they got all of our gold, too.
So, wow, we really got it this time. Amazing. The Bible repeats itself. The stories of the Bible tend to be played out over and over. As you just mentioned, I had never noticed that before. Another double, the Exodus, and how that we are now, like the Israelites were when they are in captivity to the Egyptians then for over 400 years. Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're coming to a point here. Now, what happened in Exodus? Well, eventually, let's see, the 10 plagues that happened.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Well, we went right down. We had all 10 plagues. Now, here's the thing. When Moses first went to Pharaoh, he brought a message. He said, Yahweh said, let my people go. And Pharaoh said, who is this Yahweh that I should let him go? Whoops, big mistake, Pharaoh, because you're about ready to find out. Here come 10 plagues. Well, we go to Revelation. We got trumpet blasts, 7 trumpet blasts. We've got 7 bowls of anger. And we've got Armageddon. It sounds like a pretty good combination to me. Plagues being brought against who, though? You see, when we look at who, we go to Revelation 19, chapter 19, and we go down to about the 17th verse. And it says that there was an angel standing in the sun, and he calls the birds of mid-heaven together to come to the great feast of God, the great banquet of the Almighty. And he says they are gathered together to eat the fleshy parts of men, the fleshy parts of the kings, of the military commanders, of the strong, the mighty men, the free men, maybe Freemasons, I don't know, the slaves, the great and the small. All of those who are supporting this system that we're living in are going to be destroyed by this battle of Armageddon. And they will be brought around to nothing. They will be bird food, essentially, is what the angel says. Now, that's interesting, because we are given warnings about different things, and we can tell that we are living in the last days. There's 4 or 5 chapters. The one I like pretty well sits in Acts. Well, there's one in Acts and there's one in Revelation, but it also speaks about it in Matthew, where it talks about the sun being darkened and not giving its light, and the moon being turned to blood.
Yes.
And these are the last signs that are supposed to happen. Revelation chapter 6, verses 12 through 17 gives us a good indication of the things that will happen. It starts off with a major earthquake in verse 12, that the earth will be quaked, that there will be a big earthquake. And then it goes on to say that the sun will become dark as sackcloth of hair, and the moon will be brought to blood, and that the very stars would fall from the heavens themselves, just as when an unripe tree, or when a fig tree casts its unripe figs in a windstorm. And it goes on and it says, and every mountain group and every island will be removed from their place, and that the heavens would be removed, just like a scroll. Think about when you open or close a scroll. As you close a scroll, you can no longer read the words. They all kind of disappear together. So picture something passing by us in the sky where all of a sudden all the stars are being blackened out. What could be creating this? What could move the mountains? What could remove the island groups themselves? And then we have a story about Planet X or Nibiru. Wow. So could this be the last sign? When we go back to Malachi now, interesting thing, Planet X. Now, we're going to jump to Acts first. Acts 2 says, as these things are happening, when we behold these things, it also says that God will give us portents in the heavens, or it will give proof in the heavens above and signs on the earth below. So blood, fire, smoke, mist. The moon, the sun will be darkened, the moon will become as blood before the great and illustrious day of Yahweh occurs. And it goes on to say, all those who call on the name of the Lord or on the name of Yahweh shall be saved.
Wow.
So there's a direct connection. We got to know God's name. It says that over and over and over again in the Scriptures. And here's the problem. See, most Bibles don't have God's name in it anymore. Most people loved King James Version. King James Version, when it came out, was the most modern Bible around, and it was a Bible for the people. That's why everybody's used it. Before that, if you had a Bible, pretty much before the King James Version, if you owned a Bible, the Catholic Church was going to burn you at the stake for owning it. That's just the way it was.
They were nasty about that.
Absolutely. They didn't want you to find out the truth. They didn't want you to find out what was written in the Bible, because if you could read what was written in the Bible and you could understand it, guess what? You would figure out the truth. And that's where we are today, is in figuring out the truth. Everybody can own a Bible. I've heard so many people say, oh, the Bible is written by men. Oh, the Bible was twisted. Oh, the Bible this. Oh, the Bible that. You know what? If the Bible has been messed up that much, how could I figure out all this stuff just by reading what's in the Bible?
Right, and I've heard the King James Version is very close to the natural scrolls and manuscripts that they have found. It's very, 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 very accurate translation. And men who made the copies by hand, they were very careful. I mean, you were talking about the Word of God, so you're going to make sure that every jot and tittle's in place, you know, when you're making a man-made copy.
The only thing that they did, and this was by order of the king, what they did is they felt, and this is probably leaked over from the Jewish belief, from the Hebrew belief, they felt that God's name was too holy to say, so they took out the name Yahweh or Jehovah over 7,000 times. So,
wow.
And that was replaced with Lord or Lord God or God. So most people today who read the Bible have no idea what God's name is or what it even means. So, you know,
wow.
You read the 91st verse, the 91st Psalm. That whole psalm is talking about developing a relationship with God, developing a relationship with Yahweh or Jehovah, loving our God, seeking Him as our rock, looking to Him for protection. And in Psalms 91, verse 7, it says, 1,000 will fall by your very side, and 10,000 at your right hand. But to you no harm will come. You will merely observe the retribution of the great day of the Lord Almighty.
Wow.
Isn't that interesting? When you read down a little further, it says, because you put your faith in Yahweh, that He will send His angels that you should not even stumble your foot upon a stone.
Amen.
And so once you make that connection, now that keeps on working out over and over. And by removing that God's name, now, well, if you don't know God's name, who are you going to call? God's name is not God.
Right.
There are lots of gods, especially when you get into the Hindu and Buddhist religions. The Hindus have several 100,000 gods that they give credit to. And all of this comes back from the days of Nimrod, where the early Sumerians worshipped whomever they could, where the first worship of the sun and the moon and the stars came about. And so we have lots of gods today. And who do the rulers of the elite worship as their gods? Well, it depends. Look outside their big office buildings. You go to Rockefeller Center, the elite family of Rockefeller like Prometheus. They've got his statue right outside their office building. You look at the Statue of Liberty. We're told it's the Statue of Liberty sitting in New York Harbor. But originally, Eiffel designed that. The same guy who made the Eiffel Tower, he designed the Statue of Liberty. It was originally designed, and do your homework on this, don't just take my word for it. It was originally designed as the statue of Isis, and it was supposed to be placed at the head of the Suez Canal in Egypt, except that all of the Islamic people in Egypt did not want a pagan god in their country or goddess. And so it became a present to the Freemasons in America. And so we call it the Statue of Liberty.
Oh, my.
But still, it's a statue of the goddess Isis. You mean Isis as in is the wife of Ra, whose money is on whose eye is on our dollar bill? Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
I've heard that. My goodness.
Why
of all things.
Why does the Washington Monument look like one of the phallic symbols that were raised in ancient Egypt, or in Baal, or the Hebrews did when they were involved in Baal worship? They raised up these obelisks that were supposed to be the male phallic symbol of the god that they worshipped, whether it be Ra or Baal or Molech. And here we get a little hint of what's going on. If you go to Acts, the 7th chapter, verses 42 and 43, the disciple Stephen is standing before the Jewish high court, the Sanhedrin, and Stephen is talking to the high priests here of Israel, and he quotes the prophet Amos, and he says, "Was it to me, O house of Israel, to whom you worshipped those 40 years in the wilderness? No, it was to the tent of Molech and the star of the god Raphan, to whom you worshipped and to whom you made idols. And for that I will send you far away past Babylon." Now, around 600 B.C., that actually happened. The Babylonians came in, they conquered the southern two-tribe nation of Israel, and they hauled them off to Babylon. After the Medes and Persians destroyed Babylon, the Jews were repatriated back to Israel, and they built the temple again. Well, what happened after Stephen said what he said? General Titus came in the year 70, and he laid waste the city again.
Mm-hmm.
And he caught the city with about 2 million people in it. He caught it during Passover, when everybody came to Jerusalem to celebrate Passover. Out of 2 million people, only about 90,000 survived. The historian Josephus Flavius said that Titus took about 90,000 Jews back to Rome. Now, that's not the end of the story. Who were the ones that were taken back, though? If you look, they were the ones who were... are we still on?
Yes.
Hello? Oh, we're still together.
Yeah.
Good. Everything got really clear. I've heard a lot of static, and then all of a sudden all the static went away, so I thought, we either lost signal or we're still together. I'm amazed at the cell phone. Cell phones haven't worked all day here. I'm amazed that it
this must have been God. God was looking out for this show tonight, because this is good.
I'm not going to argue with that.
I'm taking notes and everything as fast as I can. So let's take a look at what actually happens, though. By the end of the 1st century, most of the Jewish nation, or the Hebrew nation that was taken as captives back to Rome, they became free, and they assimilated themselves into the European society. Mm-hmm. Now, the Holy Roman Church didn't happen yet. That wasn't about to happen for another 200 years. This is the end of the 1st century. So we've got who is left. The elite rulers of Jerusalem were taken back to Rome. Within the next 30 or 40 years or so, most of them have bought their way out of slavery. The oldest Jewish settlement in the world is actually a suburb of Rome. It's been there since about 200 B.C. Yeah, so that's the oldest settlement, the oldest continuous Jewish settlement on the face of the earth. So they had allies there. They had people to help them buy themselves out of slavery. And so the elite went right back to work, becoming part of European society. No doubt when the church formed, the first church, they became part of the ruling class of the church. As you had the aristocracy forming, they became part of the aristocracy. And then after about 1,000 years, the church decides, around the year 1100, or the end, right around there, that it wants to go back and capture the Holy Land. It wants to capture Jerusalem. Well, wait a minute, didn't Titus do this 1,000 years earlier? So we have the Crusades. Now, here's the interesting thing about the Crusades. As soon as the Crusaders, the Knights Templar specifically, the Knights Templar come forward, and this is a family affair. These are cousins that form this group, and they go to the Middle East,
put an army together. They go to the Middle East. They lay siege to Jerusalem, and they kill everyone. Man, woman, child, Christian, Jew, Muslim, didn't make any difference. They killed everybody, and then they started digging. Wait a minute.
Wow.
How did they know that there was something to dig for? How would they know that there was something to dig for unless their ancestors who worshipped Molech or the star of the god Raphan buried it there?
Right.
And so now what you find over the next 200 years, Europe is transformed from wood to stone. A banking system forms, one which our banking system today is based on, a banking system of credit. Massive buildings start coming out. We see these great cathedrals being built and these castles being built. And the Knights Templar become the second most powerful organization in Europe next to the church itself.
Wow.
And
That's
then
amazing.
finally the church turns around and it outlaws, it bans the Knights Templar, and it says that the Knights Templar were committing all sorts of blasphemies against God and against the church. It says that they took up the star of Lucifer and that they held the cross upside down and that they committed homosexual acts. And they were doing all of these same things that the worshippers of Molech and the star god Raphan did. And so the Knights Templar are directly connected to the Molech worshippers back during Jesus' day, who were part of the hierarchy of Jerusalem. And didn't Jesus say, "You are from your father the devil, you wish to do your works of the devil"? And that one was a manslayer when he started. And where does Stephen link it up to? Stephen brings it back to when they were in Egypt. After they left Egypt, that they were worshiping Molech and the star god Raphan. Well, the Romans called Raphan Saturn, and they celebrated the holiday Saturnalia. The church changed the name of the holiday from Saturnalia to Christmas. So every year, people are still worshiping the star of the god Raphan. And what do most people put on top of their Christmas tree?
An angel.
A star or an angel.
Star.
Yeah, one of the other, a star or an angel. Now, what does the star of Raphan look like? Or it's also called the star of Molech, too. Go to Google Images, look it up. It looks just like what is called the Star of David. It's the Star of Zionism. It's the Star of Molech and Raphan. Let's move quickly, fast forward. Here we are in the 21st century, but in the 20th century we got this thing called Bohemian Grove. And what do they do out of Bohemian Grove? Well, the world's most powerful men come together to do whatever they darn well please out at this private camp or resort in California. But the first thing that they do is they hold a ceremony and they worship Molech, which is now they portrayed as this 40-foot high stone owl. It's an owl of wisdom.
Yeah.
And they call it Molech. Look at your dollar bill. Molech is on the dollar bill. If you want to know where, it's a tiny, tiny little owl that sits up in the upper right-hand corner right by the number 1. It's barely there. If you want to see who's ruling Washington, D.C., go to Google Maps or Google Earth and go focus on the White House, on the Capitol building, and back up away from the Capitol, and you'll see that all the Capitol grounds are laid out, and it looks like the shape of an owl with the eyes and the beak and the wings. Interestingly enough, the Capitol is made in the image of the Vatican. If you go to Google Earth, go look at the Vatican. Come right down at it. You got the Vatican. Out in front of the Vatican, you've got the obelisk of Ra, the pillar of Ra. And then you go a little further, and as you're coming out from the Vatican, you pass the pillar of Ra, and why that's in the Vatican, the phallic symbol or the penis of Ra, right smack in front of the Holy Mother. Yeah, think about that one for a while. But off to the side is a 5-sided star fort called the Pentagon. I'm sorry. Sorry. The one in Washington D.C. is called the Pentagon. I forgot what the actual name of the fort is over at the Vatican, but there it is. It's St. Peter's. You got the obelisk, and then this five-sided star-shaped fort. And when you go to Washington, you see the Capitol building, you see the Washington Monument, and then you cross the Potomac River, and off on the left-hand side is the Pentagon, or the five-sided star-shaped fort. And so you've got this same worship which infiltrated the church. Well, first it came out of Egypt. It infiltrated the nation of Israel. And from there it infiltrated the church. From the church, it infiltrated politics and controls Washington, D.C. Ever wonder why every president that goes and sees the Pope kisses the ring? Guess what? We're still under the realm of the Pope. We're still under the thumb of the Vatican, but not for long. Because we're looking at, you brought up, I'm tying all this back in, you're going to love it. We've got this group which is controlling the world through the monetary system. The bankers, the money changers that Jesus drove out of the temple. And what did Jesus say? You've turned my Father's house into a den of thieves.
Yeah.
Look who's stealing the gold and the money. It's the bankers that are taking everyone's gold and money. And they are controlling the governments of the world. There are only 4 or 5, I believe it's 4, governments now that do not have a federally controlled banking system like we have. Right. They are Iran, North Korea, and Cuba. Let's see, Libya used to be part of the group, and Iraq used to be part of the group, and Afghanistan used to be part of the group, but they're not part of the group anymore. They have federal banks in them now. So we went to war in each one of those countries and installed a federal banking system. I'm sure Syria is going to wind up with the federal banking system before long, too. And so the whole world will be lying in the power of the money changers, the wicked ones who were worshiping Molech and Raphan, who are still in charge of the world today. Now, these same ones married through within the hierarchy of the aristocracy of Europe. They intermarried there. They had alliances there, and it's still going on now. And it brings us to the House of Windsor and the European aristocracy. Now, most of the European aristocracy still answers to the Pope. Isn't that interesting? Still answers to the Pope. But England kind of broke free. Now, England, or the House of Windsor, owns 23% of the land mass on Earth. There's only one entity which owns more land than the House of Windsor, and that is the Vatican. The Vatican is the largest landholder on Earth. Private landholder, individual landholder.
You're kidding.
On Earth. Nope.
And how much do they own, Peter? Do you know the percentage by chance?
I don't know the percentage, but they pretty much own everything below the U.S. border. As a matter of fact, there's even wording within our Constitution which brings the United States as a corporation, which is owned by the Vatican and by the English royalty. We were never a free country. We're a corporation.
God help.
Washington, D.C., the City of London, and the Vatican are 3 independent cities not controlled by any country or by the country in which they find themselves. They are independent city-states.
That's Washington, D.C., and the Vatican, and what was the third one, Peter?
The City of London.
The
City of London is the head of banking. Washington, D.C. has got the military sewn up, so that's where all your military control decisions are being made out of, and the Vatican is in charge of the religions of the world. And if you don't believe me, go do some history and look at all the fine things that Pope John Paul II did to unite the religions of the world. So there's no more pure religion there. It's a little bit of this, a little bit of that, whatever they can sell the people. But what they're not selling the people is the love of God and the love of neighbor and how we are supposed to build these relationships. That they're not selling the people. Isn't that terrible?
It is. And I'm looking in this 3 places for an analogy of like the unholy trinity. You know, the Antichrist and the beast and whatever the third one is. I've lost it. You know, that imitates the Father, Son, the false religion, the false prophet. Yeah, the Antichrist, the beast, and the false prophet. I'm wondering if those fall into those three. Maybe one's from Washington, D.C., one's from the Vatican, and one's from the city of London, eh? I'm just saying. I don't know. Is that where you're going?
It could very well be set up there. It seems like the prophecies in Daniel 7, have some application here where it talks about these entities as beasts. And then there's one more. It's a really fierce beast. It's got iron teeth, and it comes in and destroys everything in its path and leaves nothing but destruction. And so right now the world is being controlled essentially by the Vatican, by London, and by Washington, D.C. Let's face it, a country steps out of line, they're going to have to deal with the United States. Or their banking system might be destroyed, or there'll be the Vatican doesn't seem to do a whole lot by itself, but you have to remember the power behind the Vatican. They're the largest landholder, and they've got the biggest spy network in the world. Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. Okay, well, what'd you do? Anything good in there that I need to let the rest of the Vatican know about? You know, they don't know. I'm sure people who feel that they're doing right are religiously moved, and they go and they tell a priest something in one country, and that priest says, well, I got to report this up the line. Then it goes right up the line to the papacy. So you've got those three cities. But we're living in this time when the world wants to be, or we're told that the world is going to be controlled by more, something that leaves these three cities in submission and destroys everything in its path. And we're looking for the return of the Antichrist, or we're looking for the Antichrist to gain power, I should say. We're told it's coming, and we're told that essentially in Revelation chapter 13, where it talks about this two-horned beast that looks like a lamb but speaks like a dragon, kind of like the United States and Great Britain. We want peace. We speak, well, we're going to carry this war out in peace. And then we start, in Revelation, the account says that it can even call fire down from the sky, kind of like what happened over Dresden, Tokyo, Nagasaki, Hiroshima, or wherever we decide to let off a nuclear bomb.
Yeah.
Are we not calling fire down from the sky? And aren't other nations just afraid to get out of line? And you see, it's this two-horned wild beast which gives strength. It breathes life into the image of the wild beast. And this image of the wild beast is already with us. It showed itself on the scene during after 9/11. After 9/11, we got the Patriot Act, and the people of the United States who would be ready to go to war in a half a heartbeat to protect their country, now came under the control of essentially foreign interests. We lost our freedom, and from the Patriot Act, we went to Permanent Patriot Act and Homeland Security and FEMA and all these other groups that are now jumping on the bandwagon that want greater control over what goes on in the United States. And the people of the United States of America have gone from brave and being free to being little chicken butts and being suppressed by all of these ridiculous laws that are being put into place that tell us that we're not even smart enough to take care of our own good.
Yeah.
You know, come on. Let somebody cross the borders and see what happens. See if the military does it. Let there try to be an occupation of this country, and it will break out into civil war. We know that. We know that militias will come out of the woodwork. People will be coming out and raiding anybody that's infiltrated this company. There will be war on the streets because Americans are still brave. Americans are still ready to protect themselves. But we've been lied to so much that it's hard to really understand what we should be doing. And remember, Jesus said, he who lives by the sword shall die by the sword. He told Peter, put your sword back. Yep, Peter had a sword. That was fine. But he was told not to use it.
He had a conceal and carry permit, right? So it was okay for him to have it.
You had a permit to carry, but you know what? You weren't to use it now, let's face it, if we have to take flight, Jesus said, when you catch sight of the disgusting thing standing where it ought not, then it's time to flee the city and go to the mountains. We may have to flee the city areas and go to the mountains to seek shelter and hiding. We may need firearms to protect ourselves, but you know what? If we go back to the 91st verse, or the 91st Psalm, and we read the Psalm and our faith is entrenched enough, guess what? If our faith is entrenched in God, we will have our faith there and He will protect us.
Amen. Amen, Peter. Now, can I don't know where we're at. We got about 10 minutes, but you were saying a while ago we were in Revelation 8. I don't know if you want to go back to that, or if we don't have time, I understand if you got more you want to say from where we're at.
Revelation 8 is pretty much summed up right now. As far as we've seen those things happen to some extent. They might get worse. Revelation 13 has happened, where when Revelation 13 talks about this wild, 7-headed, 10-horned wild beast which ascends out of the sea. And this we can pretty much equate to the League of Nations, which came out of the sea of turmoil of the First World War. It talks about, and interestingly enough, world history, we have, and I might be losing phone power here, so I don't know.
Okay, I could. Well, we love you, and thank you for coming on. We're down to the last 8 or 9 minutes anyway, but we'll hang on to you as long as we can. But amen.
Okay, well, where we are now is let's see, Revelation 13. We've had essentially Revelation 13 taken care of. I'm trying to speed up and remember, not get lost. In Revelation 13, this 7-headed, 10-horned wild beast gets a death blow, and that happens with World War II. When World War II came about, the League of Nations, which was supposed to keep the world's peace, disappeared. But after that, we had the United Nations come on board. Now, we're told toward the end of Revelation that this 2-horned beast gives strength to the United Nations, or gives strength to this image of the wild beast. And didn't we see that with what happened in after 9/11? We saw the George Bush Jr. there, and Tony Blair pushed the United Nations to war with Iraq and Afghanistan over weapons of mass destruction which didn't exist.
Wow.
We got to see that. Yeah, and we got to see one law passed after another law passed after another law passed, to the point that where we have lost all of our freedoms now, right down to the point where that the few past declarations that the current president has signed, his presidential edicts, as I like to call them, or the presidential declarations, essentially everything that we own is now owned by the government. They declare national emergency. They can come into your house. They can take your clothes, take your food, take your car, take whatever they want out of your house. It's now mandated. It's now taken over by the government. We don't legally own squat once Washington says that.
My God, that's terrible.
As an American.
Me
Absolutely.
too. Me too.
So we know we're close now. In Revelation, here's how close we are. In Revelation chapter 16, you get to the 12th verse. It says that one of these bowls of anger is poured out upon the river Euphrates. Now, the Euphrates River runs right through Baghdad, right through the capital of Iraq. It says that the waters of the Euphrates were dried up, making way for the kings of the rising of the sun. Now, where would that be? You mean like the kings in Iran and China and Russia? Those countries which are east from the Euphrates? So now we're starting to see these countries all taking a larger role in world politics, and especially with China's might, as far as it being it's a world power on an international trade. We owe them a huge amount of money. So we're right there. It goes on to say that these nations will be gathered together for the day of God's war of Armageddon. So now we're at the edge of war. So something has to happen to bring all the nations together. What could happen that would bring all these nations together? President Reagan said before the United Nations that all the countries would set aside their differences if an alien attack from outside this planet kind of came upon us. He said if we were facing a threat from outside this world, an alien threat from outside this world, we would settle our differences and we would unite. He said this to the General Assembly of the United Nations. Was he getting us primed for something? I mean, we're back to aliens, and now we're talking about the Antichrist. Could these rebel angels or demons be manifesting themselves in these last days as aliens?
Yes, yes, I believe that.
So we're right down to the end of it, and all of this is being foretold in the Bible. And people say, oh, well, it's been changed. No, folks, it hasn't been changed. It's still there. The information is still there. The information that we need resides in it. Anyway, we got to be getting pretty close, and I know I'm just about out of airtime, so I'd like to just give out my website and some contact information where people can find more about this. And first of all, Peter Kling, www.peterkling.com is my website. The book is Letters to Earth. You can survive Armageddon. We have a fantastic future ahead of us. We really do, but we can't get sucked into this system. And in Letters to Earth, You Can Survive Armageddon, I give a good idea of where we came from, what we're doing here, why things have gotten so bad to the point now, and what our future is, and we really do have a fantastic future. We can survive this Armageddon situation. Also, you can join me on Facebook. Just look me up on Facebook. Join me. I've got lots of friends. I keep track of this as much as I possibly can, and I've got a lot of good friends on there who also post other things about the world news situations that are going on in the world that you're never, ever going to hear on mainstream news, or very rarely will you hear any of this on mainstream news. And I try to verify all the things that people post to make sure that they are true and correct. We are going to have major changes, but we need to remember, we need to be showing love for each other. We need to be prepared. Hey, I'm going through the middle of, this is the third blackout in two years, where it's going to be extended more than a week. And I'm prepared for this. I got extra water, I got extra food, I got some extra fuel on hand. We've got and everything else we need. So we're being forewarned. If we start getting these cosmic changes, whether they're caused by the government or whether they're caused by natural events of timing or the results of prophecies, these things that are all coming about, we can be made. We can start taking precautions for and being ready for, being prepared for. And that is the most important thing. Love Jehovah, love Yahweh, love your neighbor, love your family. Love conquers all, and nothing kills fear faster than love. And with that, I'll say good night to everyone, and love and blessings to all. Thank you for having me as a guest.
Hey, Peter, it's
90
great.
seconds.
Make sure you tell your neighbors thank you for us on our behalf as the host and as my audience are enjoying having you here. But thank him so much for letting you use his cell phonic device tonight. It's been a blessing.
Yeah, well, it had to be by the law of Yahweh, or by the rule of Yahweh, that this one went through, because I never expected to get this radio show in tonight. Never in 1,000 years would have I guessed this happened.
60 seconds.
It's God's will, and I've learned a lot.
I was going to say, absolutely. You're doing God's will. You're going to give that extra you're going to get that extra boost. You're living in harmony. We start putting ourselves in harmony. Guess what? That makes us happy. That brings joy to our life. That brings love to our life. We start caring about other people, and it kills fear. And that's what we need to do, is have that love. It'll do away with the fear.
Okay, and I think my wife's got you coming back on in the future. I don't know exactly what day. Her computer kind of crashed, but we'll be in touch with you, and we'll get together again. This has
Very
been
good. I look forward to it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'd love to give people as much to think about in as short amount of time as I have to give.
10 seconds.
Hopefully your listeners got a lot of good information. And like I said, join me on Facebook. Go to my website, Peter Kling. You can download Letters to Earth tonight. Go as a PDF file, and you can actually start reading it tonight. As long as you're not in an area where it's blacked out.
Okay. Well, all right. I think the show is out of time, so God bless you, and stay safe during this blackout. We'll be praying for you, man.
Thank you much. Love and blessings to all.
Yes. Bless all your peeps.
There is coming a day when the bridegroom is taken away. In that day they will mourn. In that day they will fast. And they will say that things as they are not okay. When someone is missing, someone is absent. Yeah, they will say things as they are not okay. When someone is missing, someone is absent. There is coming a day when the bridegroom is taken away.
Hey folks, Radio Preacher Man for Self-Reliance. These are hard times, and it could get harder. You've seen the droughts, you've seen the floods nationwide, worldwide even, so 7 billion people got to eat, so don't be left out with nothing to eat. Get yourself some victuals put back on the shelf. Now I got a product I want to tell you about. It's called Shelf Reliance, and this is good food. You can use it on a regular basis. Get you some dehydrated food, and you got some easy prep meats. They got vegetables and fruits dehydrated, ready to eat as a snack, or you can reconstitute them for your cooking needs. You can get grains, bread, milk, eggs. It's a full line of food products, even dessert, such as ice cream and fudge brownies. Hello. So check it out at radiopreacherman.shelfreliance.com. That's radiopreacherman.shelfreliance.com. It's also a wonderful business opportunity for those of you looking to do something with your lives on the side, or instead of being unemployed, or whatever your situation is, brothers and sisters.